you so much for being here. This is another episode of the XR Magazine podcast, and I am Diana, your host. Today, we're going to be speaking with Dino Fejzagić, who is the co-founder and CTO at CodeEffect, where he leads a team of engineers and creators building XR immersive experiences. XR, for the ones who are not familiar with the term, stands for extended reality and is an umbrella term to describe virtual reality, augmented reality, and mixed reality. Dino is an active contributor to open source projects like the Reality Toolkit, which particularly is related with the mixed reality toolkit from Microsoft. This sounds all exciting. Let's jump in and know even more about Dino. Hi, Dino. How are you doing today? We're very, very excited to hear directly from you, the CTO at CodeEffect.
Hi, I'm doing very good. Actually, I just had a very nice meal, and I'm now looking forward to talking to you.
Thank you so much.
Having me.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you. Okay, so Dino, please let us know a little bit more about how CodeEffect was born and why.
Okay, yeah, sure. So the journey started back in 2016, I believe. It was around the time when the first HoloLens device was launched. I was immediately sold on the idea that this is the future of computing, sort of. And I really wanted to get my hands on that device. And as you probably know, back then it was very hard to actually get your hands on one. At my former employer, I was responsible then for Unity development using the Unity engine, which is like still the go-to tool, I believe, in my opinion, for XR development. And that's where I was lucky enough to work with HoloLens. And then with time, things grew, and I was working with Oculus, now Meta, and other providers like Magic Leap, etc. So, but at some point I realized, okay, this is not enough for me just doing being in this status. So I wanted to create something on my own, just to launch my own company, which is CodeEffect now. So I first was working as a freelance engineer in the XR space, and then I made it official and founded this company called CodeEffect, which is focusing on XR solutions in the business-to-business area, so to speak. And that's where we are at today.
Yeah, that sounds amazing. I understand you have, like a solid experience, good experience with the HoloLens, or basically the MRTK also. Yeah. In your own perspective, when designing an app, I know in the community we have this type of questions where how is that process is undertaken? So what is behind the app? Like how people design the app? What is the workflow?
Yeah, that's right. It's a very good question. So personally, I always look for, I mean, it might seem obvious, but the first question we need to ask is, what problem are we trying to solve? Because it's at the foundation of everything. And we've seen a lot of XR applications, VR, AR, that are just for the show, sort of. They make cool things, they have fancy effects, but I really want to see what can we achieve and what problems can we solve. And that's how we approach the projects. So we first have some deep dive sessions where we try to understand how a business is working and what are the processes that we can potentially optimize using this technology. And then we design the application around that. Of course, paying attention to making onboarding as easy as possible, because a lot of our applications, in the end, some workers get the devices and they need to understand how to use it, right? So we need to pay a lot of attention to onboarding and making things easy to use. We cannot expect everyone to be like me, for example, who's just so familiar with the tech. I mean, even if some brand new device launches, I will likely be able to get around with it and understand how it works. But there's a lot of people still, obviously, that never ever have had a headset on their head. So we need to remember those too and help them on their way into the future of XR or working. And that's our approach, essentially.
Yeah, thank you so much. What is your recommendation for these type of applications, which for some of us that are still navigating through the industry and in the design maybe field, what are some of the recommendations that you can give specifically when you want to decide UIs for maybe HoloLens or for this type of devices? What are some particular, recommendations that you've learned in the process?
Yeah, that's right, and it's actually a very important topic, and I see a lot of designers struggling with I mean, everyone's used to using, I don't know, Adobe XD or Figma to create some 2D UIs and Photoshop here and there. And that's great. And it works to a certain degree with XR as well. You just sort of transfer it into 3D space. But in terms of tooling, my recommendation would be for artists, and that's how I work with other artists as well, is to try and at least get a foundational understanding of, for example, Unity. So you don't have to be a programmer, but Unity is also targeting artists. And essentially, if you get a basic idea of how UI is built using Unity, then you don't have to prototype in Figma, for example. You can prototype right in the engine, and the developer can pick it up and connect the pieces to make it a working UI, for example. It's one advice I can give, but I understand it's not easy to learn a new tool. But it's really how I approach these kind of things. I know there's a couple of tools around, like Microsoft Maquette was an attempt to make prototyping UI easier or experiences easier in VR, but I have yet to see a tool that is sophisticated enough and works well enough that it's a go-to tool for XR UI design. So I believe you really have to get to the meat and learn the tools that the programmers will use as well. I mean, one common thing is that, for example, font sizes and in general icon sizes, etc. It's a very common thing that we get a UI design from a UI UX artist, and then we have to translate it into VR, and then we make that, and then we get some feedback. Oh yeah, can you increase the font a little? I thought it's going to be bigger, etc., etc. So it's really I see where you're coming from. It's a very important problem that we still need to solve in the XR space.
Yeah, I think that we are in the stage of beginning to start creating, based on the experience, the standards that always arise when there is a new, medium, which happened, for example, when websites, so new standards had to be created. So at this point, we are in that stage, but it's interesting to see how, from your experience creating this type of applications, and particularly for HoloLens, what would be some of those recommendations? Although I think that these platforms also offer some sort of guidelines sometimes, right? They have these type of resources available. If somebody might be wondering about that also, I think.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, particularly for HoloLens, and as you mentioned, there is the MRTK, which has a lot of a big toolbox for to make your application or experience look as much as possible like it was a native application on the HoloLens device. And we are currently seeing a shift here as well, because in the beginning, everything was far interaction. So you would just use your hand and pinch and use controllers. But we are more and more now shifting towards hand tracking, in my opinion, which I love. I love hand tracking, and I think it's, I can't wait until every other application supports it as well. And I think it's a big, it's a new challenge again, because now all of a sudden, what used to work, flat 2D UI in 3D space, was okay for far interaction. But now that we want to touch things and press things, it's suddenly completely broken and it just doesn't feel right. And, but MRTK has some resources here as well, and Facebook, Meta, also has these integration package that can help artists and designers to create 3D interaction UI. But it's all, there is a steep learning curve still involved, unfortunately.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, in regards, I know you've been a contributor for open source projects like the Reality Kit and for the prototyping. What are some of the lessons learned or interesting stuff that you can share there in that regards about you as a contributor or discoveries that you found, etc.?
Yeah, so I mean, one thing I can really share and recommend is not being only a user, but also starting to contribute. Actually, some time ago, I was just using these toolkits. I was using the Holo toolkit, I was using the MRTK, and that was fine. But I only started getting the big picture and really making progress as well on my professional capabilities as a developer when I started contributing back, because suddenly you don't only solve your problems, you also solve others' problems. Your application might not need a certain feature, but someone else needs it. And once you start thinking about stuff that others need, it helps you to grow so much in your capabilities. And with the MRTK, so I was contributing initially to the XRDK, which was a fork of the MRTK. And just recently we made another fork to focus on XR. So I mean, there's different opinions here, but the MRTK, in my opinion, was always a very Microsoft-centric toolkit, which is great, and I still use it. And then the XRTK was trying to also target a classic 2D development audience. And that's why we made another fork now that is really, I really want to solve problems that XR devs are facing. And that's where I learn a lot. And that's my recommendation. Try to get into contributing open source code to any of these toolkits. There's the VRTK as well. And you will grow a lot in your understanding of the tech and the tooling.
Yeah, thank you so much. So how is the landscape of creating apps or experiences right now? Is it possible for someone who doesn't have a background in coding at this moment to be able to build something like that, or not yet?
I think to a certain degree there is there's someone who, so if you have a developer background but not in XR, then that's good, and you should be able to get first steps done quite fast enough. And even if you are not a tech person at all, of course there is a lot of reading to be done, but it's still possible without writing a line of code to create cool experiences. There's a couple of tools out there like Builder and Maquette is, I think, still available. And rec room. So there's a lot of applications that you can use to create something. Now, in terms of when it gets very specific, when you want to solve a specific problem of some business or transfer a process into XR, then I believe we are still not quite there yet. So you're going to need some sort of technical background here. But it's getting better and better with time. Essentially, as a programmer, we are always working on making ourselves obsolete in a way, because we create all the tools that at some point will do what we were initially doing, and I'm really looking forward till everyone can create cool experiences.
Yeah, that's amazing. I'd like to explore a little bit your entrepreneurial side, because as you mentioned, at some point, maybe you were part of another company, offering your services. Maybe at some point you move into being a expert developer, offering your services individually. And now you have your own studio. So that's a perfect example to show this transition. In terms of that role, that entrepreneurial role, how is that jump from being a developer, working for a company, and then an entrepreneur? Like, did you have any gap there that you felt you had to fill, or how was your experience?
Yeah, I in a way, I always felt there is this gap. There is something more I want than just being able to decide on my own what projects to work on, and also build a team of enthusiasts and really capable people that can push the limits of what is possible today. So I think that was one motivation. The role of an entrepreneur is quite challenging for me, because I'm a very so I love my job as a programmer. So it's very hard for me to switch the toggle and stop programming and focus on, I don't know, sales, acquisition, making the company grow. Luckily, I have partners on my side that help me out with this. And so as a CTO, I try to really focus on the tech aspect of it. I do help and I want to help grow the business as well, because it's I like challenging myself to grow as a person. And so I want to learn also the business side of things, but it's very challenging for me, because whenever I catch a free minute, I want to spend it on creating something instead of doing paperwork basically, or doing some in quote boring stuff. That's very challenging for me, but still very exciting, and I love it.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, that's part of the journey. So how when in that role, entrepreneurial role, beside what you just mentioned, what has been other big challenges that you foresee having for a company as it starts to grow, for example, as CodeEffect?
Yeah, so one of the challenges is actually still acquisition or finding new projects to work on. There's a lot of companies that want to do something in XR, but then once they learn about the effort that's needed to get there, they jump off. Or it's still a very emerging technology, right? Even though it's being used in the industry a lot already. And then there's this other challenge where sometimes you will end up having too much work, and then you will suddenly have not enough work. So it's hard to find the perfect balance of for the team of when to grow. So you don't want to grow the team and then suddenly you don't have enough work for everyone. And that's one challenge that we are facing, and that so far we've been able to overcome. But it's the main challenge I'm seeing, is having a steady stream of work. We get a lot of requests for classic 3D like serious gaming, or even 2D apps for mobile phones, but we decided to not do that anymore. Initially, we were offering these kind of services as well, but then we just want to do what we love, and this is XR, and we somehow have to manage finding the balance between growing and having enough projects. So that's
yeah, that's amazing. I think that now that you mentioned this, for the community who is listening, it's very relatable. Maybe someone is thinking on becoming more independent, beginning their own journey as a either freelancer or a company. How do you get the clients? How or what would be your recommendations in order to grow? Because as we were discussing, it's still emerging. And how do you convince a client, or how do you portray of the importance of these using these type of applications for their business?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I think, yes, it is emerging, and it's if you want to say niche, but that's also a strength we have, right? It's an advantage we have, because if there's 100 developers, only maybe 2 or 3 or a handful actually have experience with XR at this point in time. So I can only recommend for convincing businesses or starting a career as a freelancer or growing a business to work on your CV, have some projects ready that you worked on, and show that you have the skills needed, and then understand what are the main use cases right now. So obviously we have education, we have remote assistance, we have remote training, etc. So there is a couple of main use cases that we at this time have with XR, right? There's of course also gaming, but it's very hard to, so very few businesses are looking for serious games in XR. And then understand this, and this brings me back to your first question. So understand what the problem is that we are solving here, and then you can sell it. You just have to get your foot into the door and get a meeting with a company, business, and then you have to convince them, look, there's already a mass of companies that are using this today, and they are saving money, saving time, etc., whatever. So there's already so much potential here, and if you achieve to convince someone that they are also able to save money or time or improve processes, then that's already a great start. So because it's a fact that XR can already today solve problems and help businesses reduce costs or increase efficiency. So you just have to get your facts together, and then you should be able to convince anyone, really.
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, this is one of the common questions for people who is beginning to produce this type of work, is how to expand on the portfolio of projects that they can get. So thank you so much for your feedback on that. Yeah. And so what are, upcoming projects that you're looking forward to work on, or are you specialized in certain areas, and why? Please let us know.
Yeah, we are, or I'm not specializing in any areas actually. So as CodeEffect, we love the challenge, and we've been working a lot in automotive and a lot in marketing events. So it's but really I would never say no to any sort of project I have never done before, because every industry is different, and I don't want to specialize on anything, and we have the capabilities and the tools to create for anything, and learn along the way. In XR, as you might know, it's often hard to build a portfolio because I'd say 90% at least of what we do is behind doors, and we don't get to ever publish it somewhere or showcase it anywhere because it's just internal tooling to other companies. And but it's possible, definitely. I can recommend talking to your clients early enough in the product or development cycle, whether you are allowed to use it for your own portfolio, and so you can showcase your work. Yeah, so that's my recommendation.
Thank you so much, Dino. It's been amazing. Please let us know how people can get a hold of you, your team, or the company.
Yeah, actually, I think LinkedIn is a very good way. I enjoy using LinkedIn a lot. I grow there my connections, and it's a very good way to get in touch with me. And also, I'm on GitHub, as we mentioned. You can search me by my name. There's very few people that have the same name, so you should find me. And I'm also on Twitter, so that all of that works. Or you can just send me an email to dino@codeeffect.io. That also works.
Yeah, thank you so much, Dino. Dino, is there anything that you wish I had asked you today?
Oh, that's a good question. you keep asking very good questions. I don't think so. I think no, I don't think so. I think it was a very interesting talking to you, and there's no questions I was missing here.
Thank you so much, Dino. It's been a big pleasure to be able to share all of these amazing insights that you have about the XR industry, how it is, and your contributions with the MRTK and your work. Thank you so much. And I really hope to see you in another interview showcasing maybe one of your bigger projects.
Yeah, definitely. I hope so. Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you so much, and see you in the next episode.